So, Abe, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, it was sort of alluded to in the Q&A a bit, but the fact that a tremendous amount of the workers during the occupation were themselves immigrants, a lot of Latinos. How did that factor in terms of the decision making for people to decide to occupy the factory, and in terms of both the pros and the cons of doing an occupation?
Well, one of the decisions folks had to make was, like early on, folks looked for volunteers. The leadership of the local looked for volunteers to occupy the plant, and one of the considerations they made was whether folks had documents. So I mean that alone was one of the biggest factors. And then the fact that it's mostly Latino and black also meant that there were people who just had records, and they didn't want to endanger anyone who either had a record or didn't have documents. Of course, it's not really a politically smart thing to say that, but they wanted to give folks the opportunity to decide whether they wanted to do it or not. And then the leadership set about really building, and had been doing this for years, really building solidarity between the Latino workers and the black workers in the factory. This was major work, right? That had to be done, and that had to have been done for an action like this to take place.
There was a part in the beginning of the documentary with an excerpt of President Obama, basically speaking in support of the fact that workers should have right to salaries and severance and so forth. Has there been any contact with the administration from the UE in recent months? What's the sense of where the current administration stands on kind of the issues that you're organizing around?
Well, a few months ago, Vice President Biden came to the factory when Serious Materials bought it and was starting to reopen it, which was kind of like a second endorsement of sorts. But their interest was more in kind of the green jobs angle and economic recovery. Beyond that, we haven't had any contact with the Obama administration, as far as I know. We're a union that chooses not to endorse political candidates because essentially because we never know who we may have to really put pressure on eventually. And these are decision makers. These are folks who who we know make decisions that affect our lives. So we want to leave ourselves open to to being able to put pressure on them if we want to. Beyond the Biden visit to the factory, that's been it as far as I know. Yeah, we as a small union put a lot of effort into EFCA, which is labor law reform, and talked to Congress people, and no surprise, right? It was gutted and then dropped off of the agenda. There's work that needs to be done, right? Both with this administration and in Congress, just among decision makers in general. Illinois has been lucky in some ways. I mean, we have decent political leadership, both at the state level and at the national level, but in terms of their connection to the struggles of workers and regular working folks, there's a really big gap.
What's been your experience or relationship with other unions, whether in Chicago or around the country, around the world for that matter, since the occupation, but particularly U.S.-based unions? What kind of relationships have developed, or what kind of barriers are you still trying to deal with in terms of trying to fight for workers' rights around the country and to sort of push for the kinds of policies and strategies that you all are speaking about?
Well, today we actually had an example of some of our work coming to fruition, or the past few days, and we had this huge rally in downtown Chicago where the American Banking Association was meeting today, and over the last few days. That's the kind of coalition work that that we've at least in Chicago, have been trying to work towards for months since the occupation. I think it actually took there was another fight that happened in Chicago with Obama's suit maker, the Hartmarks factory, that was going through a very similar situation. They were just going to try to Wells Fargo was just going to liquidate the factory or the company and just take the money, and those workers actually threatened to do a sit-in before Wells Fargo capitulated. And that's really, I mean, so with that second example, it's really brought some of the bigger unions kind of into this fight for economic justice, and during the recession, and specifically in the fight to hold banks accountable, both for the bailout, but also just for, leaving our economy in shambles and not really respecting people's rights, and in at least both of these examples, doing illegal things in their dealings with companies that they were closing. It's been long coalition building work that seems to start to be paying off, in terms of like really beginning to focus the labor movement on some of the roots of the problems, including banks.